Now, moving on to the next slide here. So these are pictures from our village. The left picture is actually our sachem's house, the inside of it. We saw the outside before. And then the other picture is kind of a view from behind, or really the side of the sachem's house. And you can see there's a family wigwam to the right in the back. So these are some things you would see in person if you wanted to come out and visit us. But just again to touch on kind of in the woodland period, they're really settling more in certain areas and they're focusing on crop growing, agriculture. In the winter, they might move to a different location and kind of leave their structures and kind of, return, depending on how bad the weather was, things like that. So, but mostly staying in one location. Inside of the sachem's house, you can see there's a bench in there. They might store firewood that they wanted to keep dry underneath the bench. It was a good storage area. In the sachem's house, they definitely had a fire pit, and they would have in the family wigwam too. And you could see, well, hopefully you can see on the top of the sachem's house, there's a little piece of wood, and that's actually the smoke hole to let the smoke come out, because you don't want to be breathing that all in. But really, they had everything they needed inside of their small house, right? All right. And then here is where we'll talk about how I mentioned these are called wigwams, right? And I'm sure people have heard longhouse, they've heard teepee probably, but in New England, their house was called a wigwam or a wetu. It could have been called as well. And really, the way that these were built, ours in Nowashe Village were built by Indigenous people who knew what they were doing. We really wanted to bring in people who, you know, were Indigenous and could build these the way that they should be instead of someone like me building it. So what they would do is use saplings. So our wigwams have red cedar saplings. So they basically just a young tree. And red cedar is a great option because it's very insect repellent, water repellent, mold repellent. So it was a really good option, and it was abundant. It was a natural resource that they had that they could use. They might have used tulip saplings as well, bendable wood. And then on the outside of our wigwams, we actually have a simulated bark. So what that means is it's this rubber material, and it's really interesting. So if you come to Nowashe, definitely make sure you feel that material. It's this rubber material formed to bark, and then it was painted to look like bark on the outside. And if you're looking at it, it really does look like sheets of bark that you cut off a tree. And the reason why we did this is it just lasts a lot longer for us, and it's more it's just a better option for us, because what they would traditionally do is use birch bark. They could use hides or pelts to cover their wigwams, and obviously if we used real bark, we'd have to replace it constantly. But that's what they would traditionally use. And longhouses, that term is more found in the Great Lakes, Chesapeake Bay, New York area. Teepees are the Great Plains mostly. And then there's even pueblos, in the Southwest. They're kind of these adobo style dwellings that were modeled to kind of look like cliffs. They're interesting. If you haven't seen pictures of them, definitely take a look. They're these orange houses, and they look really cool. Right.